To the VTCLA Podcast. This is episode 2, and today we are here with Michael Eppolito from Winooski School District. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Berry, also co-president of VTCLA. Michael, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking this time. Could you start by outlining a little bit of what your journey was in curriculum and how you landed where you currently are serving?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. First of all, this is kind of fun. My journey towards curriculum, I think, well, at least in my current, being a administrator, started about 11 years ago now. I was a middle school social studies teacher and really happy with where I was, and also frustrated with the sort of state of how we did curriculum in the district I was at. And when an opportunity came up for me to take on sort of a teacher leadership role in curriculum, I figured I should put my money where my mouth was and try and make some meaningful changes to the way we thought about and did curriculum work. And so that led to a position down at Two Rivers for 7 years. And then really, I followed my wife to Burlington. She was working with the Tarrant Foundation, and I applied for and got selected to work at Winooski, which is really just a fabulous place to work at. And it's really pushed me as both a leader and as a learner. So it's been a really positive part of my career.
That's great. I didn't realize that you were in social studies. That's a particularly awesome area of curriculum development right there.
Yes. My favorite.
Yeah. Michael, what are the big 3 things that you are focusing on in your district going into next year? We're in that fun time of year where we're kind of finishing out the school year, but already making our list for the summer and into next year. What are your big 3?
Well, by far and away, our biggest is literacy. We have a lot of work to do in Winooski, largely because we have such a unique population here. We have a lot of multilingual learners, fairly large transient population, and so we have to be extra thoughtful in the work we do and how we go about, in particular, teaching kids how to read and how to become more efficient and proficient readers. So that work is super exciting. We've been at it now. This is our 4th year of moving into this transformation, moving into their 4th year. And we've done some really exciting work, stuff I'm really proud of in terms of ensuring that we have high quality curriculum, our assessments are good, we're looking at assessment data. And we're really also concurrently with that is we've been really focused on what good teaching looks like in literacy classrooms, K through 8. We're starting to do that work now in high school, and so this year we're just expanding our work. We're refining our work around early reading acquisition. Introducing a new component to the expeditionary learning program. We'll continue our work with adolescent literacy, which is really, I think, the most exciting work out there. The whole science of reading debate has sort of drowned out the need of focusing on adolescent literacy and what we know about how adolescents learn to read. And so we'll continue doing that work, and that's hugely exciting. We are in the proficiency side of the world. I'm here at our school development institute, so we're off-site with the high school, middle school teachers. Some of the stuff that I presented at VTCLA earlier this year, we're continuing our work here. We finally sort of gone through the complete progression of what we want to see in terms of planning and instruction. We're in those final stages now. So far, the first day and a half have been super exciting. Teachers are finally starting to get what we're trying to do and why it matters, and starting to think about like how there are changes in their practice around planning and instruction can really positively impact kids, not just individually in their classroom, but like this allows us to think more systemically about what's going on with our students. And so that is a part that we have not been able to get to, is really, we can do good instruction, we can have excellent teachers doing excellent work in individual classrooms, but until we get to a systems level where things are working together, we're never going to serve our kids like we need to. And I think we're at a point where we can start seriously doing that. So that's super exciting. And then I guess the last big thing might be MTSS work. I mean, it's such a broad term. I think we're getting more and more clear about what it is that we should be looking at. And I think I'm excited about the possibility of spending less time fretting about what we're not doing and focusing on, well, what do we know about our kids now, and what decisions can we make to improve in our work with them? And I think we're poised to do that now.
Thanks. Before I move on to the next question, because I know that you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past, can you talk about what's happening right now this week? You have a yearly institute, pretty much, right? Summer institute for your faculty and staff. Can you just talk a little bit about that for folks?
Yeah, so we at the middle and high school, so we're doing it actually K through 12 this year, which is a big change for us. K through 5 we've never done before. So that's just, we're trying it out this year. But the work in 7th and 8th grade has really sort of 3 major components. One is that we focus a lot on community conversations. We're trying to, like, in the EL world, they call it adult crew. Here, we're just talking about building community amongst adults and professionals. And so we start every day with conversations that, today we read a piece from Parker Palmer, and we talked a little bit about what is the heart of teaching for us. And so that starts our day every day, are those more relational conversations we have. And this is our 3rd year of doing it really intentionally, and our teachers love it. We don't do that enough in our schools. And so when we get to do it here, it makes it feel like a retreat, and it also builds these relationships and connections across amongst our whole professional staff that we rarely take the time to do. And then sort of like what I presented at VTCLA is we are trying to walk the talk of teaching proficiency. So we're not just talking about you need performance indicators and you need your learning targets, or what's your summative assessment. Like, those things are there and we do talk about them, but we've gone through the planning of this institute using the planning document we're asking teachers to use. And so we're making that really transparent about, here's how we're planning, and this is the experience we're creating through this planning document. So sort of model for them what we want to see in their work with students. We are explicitly, for the first time this year, explicitly tying our instruction to actual formative work. So as we introduce a learning target, we do an activity, and then we ask, that activity transforms into a formative assessment. At the end of the day, our leadership team sits down and looks at those formatives, and we make some instructional decisions. We're very transparent about that's what we're doing, because that's what we want you to do. So you're going to experience it as a teacher, and we're going to ask you then to do it with your kids. So there's that whole direct instruction, formative assessment, feedback, working with real examples, giving them models, giving them rubrics to evaluate adult work and see what the quality of that is. And then the last component is really built around our leadership team, where we sit down at the end of the day, we debrief, how did the day go? What's the teacher experience like? What are we learning from our formatives? And then how will we translate it into changes in instruction the next day? So we're trying to create that whole feeling of what we want a proficiency-based system to look and feel like. And we've been refining that over the last 4 years, and I feel like it's hard to be humble about this. I think it really feels good we're doing really good work. Still confusing and really hard work for a lot of teachers. And like I think everyone feels like it's purposeful work.
Yeah, I'd love to jump off on that because I watched the presentation. I saw some of the resources you shared with VTCLA in April around this, and you call it re-envisioning your proficiency-based system. I was also part of the IFR team, a little bit pre-COVID, and this is a very different philosophical approach that you now shared, and it has looked like some significant evolution of your system. And so if you can talk a little bit about that mindset shift and how you massaged and managed that, and then talk a little bit about that hierarchy of expectations and how you communicate your system to students and staff, assess, and then how you always know where you are on this continuum.
I only have 30 minutes, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Pick and choose, Mike.
I'm sorry, can you just
Well, let me pinpoint it a little bit here. First of all, I know that when I was on that IFR team, I believe you had a sort of a continuum of expectations where you might meet a standard in third grade, and then you're moving on to another one you might be expected to meet in fifth or sixth grade. That's completely been overhauled to look quite different, for instance. So that must have required some philosophical conversations with folks whom you would convince this is the way we're going to do this. Now we're not. Let's start there.
So, Winooski had tried, I think, in really good faith to try to do something different. So they created this 11-point scale, which really started in middle school. One of the things that we wanted to change was like they completely ignored the pre-K through 5 experience. And so they're trying to build this. We refer to it here as the 11-point scale, that kids could essentially it was taking an aspect of proficiency-based learning and applying it to their context where a student might come in at any point. So meeting students where they are and then moving them along this 11-point scale towards graduation. And they were trying to figure out like, what does it mean to move along the 11-point scale? And they had never really quite figured that out. And one of the things we noticed, and this is I think a danger we can get into, is both thinking about meeting students where they are and moving them along the scale sounds really good, except that what it ended up doing at Winooski is we continually lowered our expectations. And so we were then saying, well, okay, we don't think they can get this far, so let's just make the graduation mean this and expect less of them. And that's just a slippery slope you can get into when you don't balance that out with setting clear, high, rigorous expectations for learning and believing that all kids can rise to that. And so that was part of our first re-engineering. And some of it was really driven by the students. They were very frustrated with the 11-point system. It was unclear to them. They didn't know how to graduate. Teachers weren't really clear, so they couldn't communicate to the students really well. Kids sort of like figured out that they could aim for the lowest bar, and that's where they wanted to go. So it's taken us a number of years because that was very much the mindset amongst the teachers. They firmly believed that what they were doing was the right thing. And I think there's a lot of merit in what they were doing, but it clearly was not helping kids. And so we started with, here's what the kids are saying. Here's where the confusion is. Here's why we can't generate a transcript because we can't really figure out how to translate an 11-point scale into something that makes sense to colleges. And we need to rework this. And so what felt like for some high school teachers, a step backwards to sort of like traditional school, we often got that criticism. It was really just taking that concept of this 11-point scale and saying, no, we actually at Winooski, we still have sort of 11 levels kids move through. They're more like grade levels now, and we really start that work in pre-K. And we always expect kids to meet grade level standards, knowing that there's a variation in kids. They're not always going to be there, but the what we expect is like the grade levels to standards define what we want to see from kids at each point in their educational career. And so that's taken some work. Part of it is like I have spent a lot of time producing materials, explanation, supports that when teachers ask questions like, well, we don't have this, I can provide them with that. So like, for example, one of the first things was, well, we don't really have a way of assessing writing because in the 11-point scale system, they didn't have rubrics to assess student writing. So one of the first things I did is built an aligned K through 12 set of writing rubrics. And so when teachers were asking about, well, how do I assess kids now? I could hand that to them and say, here's how you do it. The materials are here for you to use. Part of what we now have to do is get you comfortable using them and having you see the value in using them with kids. And so we are really trying to work at the teacher level and provide them with real actionable materials, both in terms of like, this is what we expect of you. Here's what good work looks like from you. Here are supporting materials that you don't have to create. I think one of the big changes that I feel like happened with COVID is teachers are like, we just don't have the time to do all this work. And you're expecting us to do all this curriculum design and all this infrastructure work. And we're tired. We don't want to do it. So one of the things that I've been doing is like filling that gap. So creating aligned rubrics K through 12 and just giving them to the teachers and saying, so the process we'll go through here is you use them, you say what works and what doesn't work, and we'll make refinements to them instead of having everyone build everything from scratch. It's just at least at Winooski in the post-COVID era, teachers don't want to make that kind of investment anymore. They care a lot, but they're much more interested in work and having work be closer to what they care most about, which is being in the classroom with kids. I don't know if that's your answer.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. How is that hierarchy you've now built where you've got transferables and then some kind of expectations, KUDs, scoring rubrics? How has that helped how has that provided clarity for your instructionalists?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I said this at the VTCLA meeting, but one of the things that when we first started doing this work was that when Great Schools came and worked with us in 2014, I think it was. One of the things that I saw them do that made a big difference for me was they just kept coming back to these same basic concepts. For them, they used the triangle thing as well, the triangle diagram. They had different information in there, but it sort of helped me internalize, okay, so when they talk about learning targets, they mean this, and it fits here in the system. When they talk about transferable skills, they mean this, and it fits here in the system. And that coming back to that again and again helped me build my own mental model. So my mental model is not the same as Great Schools, but it is heavily influenced by what they did. And so one of the things that I have learned over the years in working with teachers is that we often assume that they know more than they do. And it's not meant to be throwing any shade on teachers, but we often, particularly as professional development designers or administrators, we think if we say something or we put it out in an email that they've got it. And oftentimes they just don't. There's not enough time to process things. There's other things going on. They have to make their own decisions about priorities. And that thing that Mike Eppolito sent me in an email, I don't have time for that. I have to get my grading done. So what we've done is we've created this a mental model, and I tell them very clearly, this is the way I think about it. And you should, since I'm the curriculum director, you need to understand how I'm thinking because I'm making decisions that impact you. So you should be able to see what my thinking is. So again, modeling that, we need to make our thinking visible. And then going back to that again and again and pointing out, so today we're working on, this week we're working on learning targets and building instructional trajectories. So I can point to that model and say, here's where we are in the system. And in that model, it's really actually very close to what you do in the classroom. It is the closest thing to actually getting into the classroom and teaching. So we're getting closer and closer to what you care about, what matters most to you. And the other pieces all inform that. And you're good. And like, for example, today we're looking at fully articulated plans and starting to say, like, you can't write a learning target for a daily lesson unless you know what your summative is. You can't really have a good summative unless you know what your performance indicator is that you're heading towards. All these things are starting to align up now. And so that's when that we can trace them through that visual and say, look, see how these things are lining up. This is why they're laid out this way. And so I keep coming back to that again and again so that they can see that and start to internalize it. And then they make their own models. That's what we have. We actually had them physically making their own models yesterday, putting all these pieces together. How does it make sense to you? Because in the end, it's not really, it's not important to me that they can parrot what I've said to them. It's important to me that they can make sense about it and talk about it fluently on their own.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for talking about your system. Mike, go ahead.
All right. So Vermont's been an interesting place to be an educator and a curriculum leader. What are 3 big challenges you see coming to schools in Vermont, and how are you thinking about those?
I think some of them have always been here and not coming. I'm going to speak only as a curriculum director. So like there's the whole policy landscape, which I don't have a real strong handle on, or even the school funding. That's not really my area, but I can talk a lot about one of the things I've been seeing is like our struggles with MTSS. And how do we implement MTSS? How do we make it work well? You know, some people are like, it works better at the elementary school and falls apart at the high school. And I think that is not, we talk about it as MTSS. For me, I see it as a curriculum problem. Is that we are not really good about knowing what kids need to be able to know, understand, and do at any point in their educational career. And so when something breaks down for a kid, whether we're not doing what we need to do, or there's something going on with the child, you know, they're facing trauma or they have real learning disabilities, whatever the cause of the breakdown, we often don't know how to intervene well. And oftentimes we're starting to default more and more to these testing companies like Renaissance or MAP, iReady, to think that solves the problem. I don't think it actually does. It's a nice little monitoring tool, but it is never going to get teachers to really understand what's going on in their classroom. And so the curriculum piece comes in is where we understand what our curriculum is well enough, what the standards we're trying to hit at each grade level and what they actually mean in terms of what kids need to know and understand and be able to do, and develop really strong formative assessments that look at how kids are performing in the classroom, and then using those formatives to start informing our MTSS system. How will we intervene? What is really going on with this student when I ask them to write, let's just say a constructed response? Like, how do I look at this to say, well, I know this child's struggling. What is it that matters the most to me in terms of intervening with this child around what's going on for them? And because our curriculum systems are so fragmented, and curriculum directors are often doing way more than they should be doing, we don't have as a system, we don't understand what kids should be doing at any particular level or how we're assessing them in order to get good, actionable responses for their learning. So I think that's one big thing that is kind of coming as rules around special ed change and just our heightened focus on MTSS. I think, you know, they've even said it, the 4 levers of whatever act it was, 176. And one of them is coordinated curriculum. And I don't think we've done enough to do that, to coordinate that. And that's no one's problem. I think it's when you work in a system where everyone is sort of on their own path, it's hard to do that work. I have to be an expert in science and math and ELA and social studies. It's too much for any one person to do. And so that makes it harder to create a coordinated curriculum. Literacy will continue to be a big problem facing our schools. I think we've made great steps in terms of improving that. Lots of folks have moved towards adopting high quality instructional materials. I think one of the biggest problems is, just like with Vermont schools all over, is like most of us, even Winooski, which feels like a bigger place, like we may have 2 or 3 new teachers coming in that may not have had the kind of training we need them to have, whether it's in the science behind how students learn how to read, or it's about digging deeply into the curriculums that we're using. It's hard to maintain those changes. Oftentimes we do a big initial set of trainings, and then it's hard to maintain that. And I think we're going to find that again. Like, I think there's been this big upswell both in adopting math and literacy curriculum. And so lots of people have gotten trained. The question that we're going to have to face in the next couple of years is like, how do we maintain that training over time? Because if we don't, we'll sort of end up where we were, 5-10 years ago, where not everyone knows, there's no common understanding of what we're doing. I think I'm going to stop it. I think for me, those are the 2 biggest things I'm thinking about right now.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. So sort of in a way to close here, you mentioned this earlier. I was going to ask you about things you're excited about moving into next year. But you talked about how much you love working in Winooski. And in a world where we have watered down the meaning of the word unique by inaccurately applying it, I think it's fair to say that Winooski School District within Vermont is truly unique. So can you just talk a little bit about Winooski, the community, and what it's like to work there and work with that population?
Yeah. Yeah, I think every school has unique challenges. I think the thing, coming from living in a largely white state that is largely monolingual and has a relatively common history, is when you work with kids that come from it. I mean, we're only working largely with kids that are coming from 3 or 4 regions around the world. The way you have to think about every decision you make requires a lot of careful thought. How do we communicate this? Is the way we're going to communicate going to get across to our parents? What do our students who are coming in with maybe very different educational experiences, maybe coming in as teenagers, having either had a very disrupted educational experience or a very different one from the United States, like how do we move them through our system and say, you're ready to graduate? That's one of the biggest struggles we have that I've never really had to think about before, is like, we have kids that are really talented and really accomplished and don't have a lot of English and are ready to be done with high school. They need to get out into the world. And so what does it mean for us to graduate a student from Winooski? For some kids, it's like any other school in Vermont, but for a large number of kids, we're challenged almost daily to think about that differently. What does it mean to graduate high school and be ready for the world? What is our responsibility for that? And that is, I think, not unique to Winooski. I think Burlington and lots of other schools with more and more students that are new to the States are facing, but it's certainly a big issue for us because it's nearly half our kids. I think also we have to, they also, like, our students are really clear about, like, we 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 want to see ourselves in what you're teaching. And they're really pretty clear with this, like, you're not doing a good enough job. And so that's a real challenge, particularly as a curriculum director, to say, so how do I respond to that in a meaningful way, in a sustainable way, to make sure that our Somali students see themselves in the curriculum, and also sort of get the sort of knowledge we think they need and the skills we think they need. And that's some work. And some, like, I've been a part of a student voice committee, started by students. It came out of the Unheard Voices Project, which is a group of our students, largely from the Congo, wanted to say, look, everyone thinks Africa is a terrible place. Africa is not a terrible place. We love where we come from, and we want to say that to you, and we want to say why, your stereotypes of Africa are wrong. Out of that particular experience, where they did a whole presentation to this Winooski community last year, and they've done it again this year, they put together a student voice group where they are directly talking with me and high school co-principals about what it is that we need to do better by them. And sometimes it comes down to, like, the food is not culturally responsive. Sometimes it comes down to our teachers, as well-meaning and as lovely as they are, and our kids love our teachers, sometimes the way they behave feels racist. And it's interesting to have a student say, that behavior feels racist, and I still really like the teacher. And so we have to be able to navigate that, by not saying, like, it's not that it's always about how can we do better by our kids. And and because they have such a different perspective than most of the people in power in our school system, it really challenges us to slow down and listen to them and think about, okay, so how do I authentically respond to you, and also build trust with you by saying, if you tell me this, that I am going to take your word seriously and do something about it. And I don't think that's hugely different from student voice anywhere, but it certainly feels much more important here at Winooski, that these kids are facing marginalization all the time, and how do we not perpetuate that marginalization?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was a fascinating answer to that question. I appreciate it. Mike, did you want to have anything else?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I recently just visited Winooski as well, and just walking around the school was just incredible. Just amazing.
It's such a great place. I love that place.
Yeah, no. To kind of close us out here, we want to give you a chance to send a shout out to someone in curriculum land that really kind of keeps you going, inspires you, or is a source of information, whatever it is. Who would you want to recognize in curriculum land as a resource to you?
I think I want to give a shout out to Laura Boudreau, who is, I think, the associate superintendent down in Bennington right now. We haven't talked in a while now, but I think Laura I really appreciated her colleagueship when I was a new curriculum director. And she's one of those people that really got me thinking about, like, how are we teaching kids to read, and what do we need to do differently? And we did some really great work around assessing writing, and how do we build systems that give us good feedback around student writing. It was always such a pleasure to work with her, and I learned so much from her. So that would be my big shout out.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Well, thanks so much for joining us. As I said, really fascinating conversation about the work you're doing in a place that is quite special in so many different ways. And so some of those ways you were able to share with us today. So thanks for taking the time, Michael. We did it. And I hope the summer goes well. The Institute finishes up well, and you're off to a great start to next school year.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was great talking to you guys. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. Bye now.